The chamber echoed with the heavy hum of alien voices, each species louder than the last, all of them unified by their contempt. The assembly was not called for debate, nor to discuss peace. It had been summoned for a declaration. Humanity, a race so new to the interstellar stage that many dismissed them as barely sentient wanderers, had been accused of trespassing, of breaking boundaries established long before their existence. The punishment, according to the king who presided over the gathering, would be either unconditional submission or extermination. The king's throne loomed at the center, a grotesque monument of iron and bone, decorated with the relics of defeated species. His voice carried arrogance, each word sharpened with disdain as he mocked the very idea of human defiance. These fragile beings walk among the stars as if they belong here. They dare to step into our dominion. Let them come before me, and I will decide how they are allowed to crawl forward, or whether they deserve to exist at all. Laughter erupted from the lords and generals who surrounded him, the sound of predators circling what they assumed was prey. They had expected a delegation of warriors, perhaps a desperate fleet hovering at the edges of their empire. Instead, when the doors opened, only one human entered. No armor, no escort, no weapon. A simple figure in formal attire, posture calm, steps measured. The mockery began immediately. Murmurs of disbelief turned to jeers, and the king himself sneered. "This is the representative of your species? One unarmed creature, barely taller than a child? Did your leaders think we would be swayed by weakness?" The diplomat did not answer. He crossed the vast floor slowly, his face betraying neither fear nor anger. His silence became heavier than words, unsettling a few of the younger aliens in attendance who shifted uneasily. But the king, feeding on the amusement of his court, pressed further. "Human, you stand in the greatest council the galaxy has ever known. You stand before a sovereign who has broken empires, shattered fleets, and ground entire civilizations to dust. Speak your terms if you have them, but know this, the choice is servitude or annihilation." Still the human remained composed. Only when the chamber quieted, when the echoes of arrogance died down, did he finally lift his gaze and respond. His voice was soft, controlled, the kind that forced attention not through volume but through precision. "Humanity seeks peace. We have come not to threaten, but to coexist. But peace is not weakness. Understand this clearly, we do not kneel." The words drew another wave of laughter, but this time thinner, edged with unease. The king leaned forward, teeth bared in a grin. "Do not kneel? You are already on the floor of my hall. Do you think your kind has a choice? You will kneel or you will burn." His hand struck the armrest of his throne with finality, a sound that signaled judgment. Around him, generals snarled, eager to see the execution carried out. The human diplomat did not flinch. Instead, he allowed the laughter to subside once more before answering, his tone unchanged. "Then you leave me no choice." The sentence was not shouted. It was not a declaration of war, nor a plea for survival. It was simple, quiet, and absolute. The effect was immediate. The chamber, which only moments ago had been roaring with derision, fell into a silence that carried more weight than any outburst. Every alien eye fixed on the diplomat, waiting for the next word, the next move, the reveal of what he truly represented. But he gave them nothing more. No gesture, no raised weapon, no cry of defiance. He simply stood there, hands folded, as though the outcome had already been written. It was this stillness, this unshakable calm, that unnerved them most. The predators who once smelled weakness now caught the scent of something else, something patient, deliberate, and mercilessly certain. The king's grin faltered, just slightly, though he masked it with another derisive laugh. Yet even he felt the subtle shift. The human's words had not been a bluff, nor bravado. They had been a verdict, and though the chamber did not yet understand its weight, they sensed it. In the unbroken silence, the balance of power had begun to tip. What unsettled them was not what the diplomat had said, but what he had not. Humans, they realized, were not here to beg. They had not sent this lone figure to plead for mercy. They had sent him because they already knew the answer, and they had already prepared for it. And so the first crack in the king's certainty appeared, not in the form of attack or rebellion, but in the form of a human who refused to tremble, refused to bow, and refused to believe in alien superiority. The silence stretched long enough to suffocate, and though none dared to admit it aloud, every ruler in that hall felt a single, chilling thought take root: perhaps humanity was not the prey they believed them to be. The stillness inside the chamber pressed down like a storm waiting to break. For a moment, the aliens convinced themselves that nothing had happened, that the humans' words were hollow. Yet the diplomat's composure continued to gnaw at them. His eyes, steady and unblinking, locked on the king. He stepped forward, not hurriedly, not timidly, but with the measured certainty of someone who did not believe himself to be in danger. Each step echoed, and the sound unsettled the chamber more than any weapon could have. The king's amusement returned in bursts, though his posture had stiffened. "You are brave," he said, voice dripping with contempt. "But bravery without strength is a short path to death." He gestured to the guards. "Let this human's blood stain these floors, so that his people know their place." The guards advanced, weapons drawn, but the human did not move. His expression carried no panic, only patience, as though waiting for an inevitable outcome. The first guard reached out, and in that instant, something subtle occurred. No blast, no scream, no clash of steel. The guard froze, body rigid, weapon dropping from his hand as though his strength had been stolen. Confusion spread as the others halted mid-step, their weapons flickering and failing. A ripple of realization spread across the chamber. The human had not needed to lift a finger. A low hum filled the air, faint enough to make some doubt if they heard it. Systems throughout the chamber flickered. The enormous displays behind the throne blinked into static. Control panels on the guard's armor went dead. And still, the diplomat said nothing. He only turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing on the king, before stepping even closer. The king snarled, attempting to mask his unease with anger. "Tricks! Human toys! They will not save you!" Yet his words lacked conviction. His court shifted uneasily, their earlier laughter now suffocated by dread. The diplomat stopped just short of the throne. From this distance, the differences between them became stark, the towering king armored in trophies of conquest, and the human standing unarmed in simple attire. Yet it was the latter who radiated authority. Then, with no warning, the king's expression faltered. His laughter cut short, his throat constricted. A thin line appeared just beneath his jaw, sharp and crimson against his scaled skin. His breath hitched, eyes wide with shock. No weapon had been seen, no strike detected, yet the wound deepened with terrifying precision. Blood pooled beneath his chin, a silent, merciless execution unfolding before the eyes of his court. The chamber erupted in disbelief. Some screamed, some stumbled back, while others stared in frozen horror. The king's massive form convulsed once before he slumped, lifeless, against his throne. The sight of their ruler undone by a single human in utter silence shattered the arrogance that had filled the room only moments before. The diplomat's voice finally returned, steady and unhurried. "Negotiations concluded." The words cut through the uproar like a blade. They were not a threat, not a boast, but a verdict. The message was unmistakable. The human had not come to bargain, he had come to decide. Panic seized the chamber. Generals reached for their sidearms, but found them dead in their hands. Energy cells unresponsive, targeting systems locked, command consoles useless. Others attempted to summon reinforcements, only to discover their channels jammed. Every safeguard they trusted, every weapon they relied upon, had been neutralized. It became clear then that the diplomat's strike against the king was not improvisation. It was proof of preparation, proof that humanity had already breached their defenses long before setting foot inside this hall. Their ships, their codes, their very security had been turned into hollow shells. The realization hit like a cold wave. The human had walked in unarmed because he never needed weapons. The war they demanded had already been fought, and they had lost before they understood it had begun. The diplomat stood motionless, letting the weight of the silence sink deeper into every corner of the chamber. No triumph lit his face, No gloating smile betrayed his satisfaction. His calm suggested something far more unnerving, that this execution, this collapse of power, was not extraordinary but expected. One of the alien warlords found his voice, though it trembled. What have you done?" The human turned his gaze toward him, voice level and clear. "We did what we always do. We observed. We learned. And when you threatened us, we acted." His words hung like a shadow over the assembly. No flourish, no embellishment, just fact delivered with the certainty of inevitability. The corpse of the king sat slumped in silence, his court paralyzed by disbelief. The arrogance that had filled the hall was gone, replaced by an emotion few of them had felt in centuries: fear. The predator's laughter had died, and in its place came the suffocating awareness that humanity did not play by their rules. The diplomat did not retreat, did not allow the moment to disperse. He remained at the center of their collapse, the embodiment of a truth they had refused to believe until it stood before them. Humanity was not weak, humanity was not prey, and those who mistook mercy for fragility would face consequences beyond their imagination. And with nothing more than silence, the human had proven it. The chamber stank of fear. Where once arrogance had filled every word, now silence pressed against the walls like a suffocating fog. The corpse of the king sat slumped, a grotesque reminder that the power they trusted had been erased in an instant. Eyes that had mocked humanity moments earlier now refused to meet the diplomat's gaze. They had demanded war, and war had answered, not with explosions or armies, but with one silent strike that had rewritten the balance of power. The human did not move quickly. He stepped away from the lifeless throne with the same unhurried calm he had carried from the beginning. The sound of his footsteps struck harder than any weapon, each echo hammering into the minds of the rulers who had considered themselves untouchable. His composure was not the bravado of a gambler, it was the certainty of a victor who knew the outcome before the game began. Whispers rippled through the chamber. Some called for immediate retaliation, though their voices trembled. Others hissed warnings, urging restraint. None dared approach. They had seen guards fall paralyzed, weapons reduced to useless metal, a king undone by a wound no one had even seen delivered. Every instinct told them striking back would only expose further weakness. The diplomat stopped in the center of the hall and withdrew a small device, no larger than the palm of his hand. Its activation filled the chamber with a faint shimmer, and then the air erupted with images. A fleet appeared above them, not alien ships triumphant in orbit, but their own vessels burning in silence. One after another, colossal carriers crumbled into wreckage, engines sputtering, hulls ruptured, command centers lifeless. Their pride, their deterrent, their assurance of superiority, all erased while they sat laughing at a single unarmed Anva. Gasps turned into cries of horror. Some staggered forward, reaching as if to touch the images, desperate to believe it was fabrication. But every detail, every identification code, every broadcast feed confirmed the truth. The fleets that were to enforce their threats had already been destroyed. The human's voice came again, unhurried, absolute. When humanity extends its hand, it is to offer peace. But when we are forced to close that hand, it becomes a fist. And fists do not ask twice. The words rolled over them like thunder. No dramatics, no shouting, yet they struck harder than cannon fire. The rulers who had spent centuries posturing as conquerors suddenly felt like prey. The realization spread that this lone diplomat was not simply a messenger. He was the embodiment of preparation, the final move in a plan that had unfolded quietly, invisibly, while they strutted with pride. The images shifted again. Not only fleets, but supply depots, communication hubs, energy relays, all of them had been infiltrated, disabled, or obliterated. Their empire's backbone was gone, severed before they even raised a weapon. For years they had watched humanity with disdain, yet all the while humanity had been watching back, mapping every weakness, testing every code, slipping into every system. The true battlefield had never been in open space. It had been inside networks, inside strategies, inside assumptions. And humanity had already won. One warlord slammed his claw against the table, voice cracking with desperation. "This is deceit. A trick of projection. We will regroup, we will. His words died as the image behind him shifted, displaying his own flagship erupting into a ball of flame. His command codes flashed beside it, undeniable proof. He collapsed back into his seat, the defiance bleeding from him. The diplomat did not gloat. He did not smile or savor their collapse. His expression remained steady, cold, as if reminding them this was not spectacle but consequence. We warned you. We asked for coexistence. Your arrogance chose this path. And now you see where it leads? The chamber descended into chaos, some shouting for surrender, others muttering prayers, many too paralyzed to speak. Yet over it all, the human's presence held dominance. He had not needed to raise his voice or move his hand. The evidence spoke louder than threats ever could. For the first time in generations, the galaxy's self-proclaimed rulers felt powerless. Their fleets gone, their leaders slain, their security gutted, they stared at a being they had dismissed as weak. And what terrified them most was not what humanity had done, but the certainty that this was only a fraction of what they could do if pressed further. The diplomat's gaze swept over the assembly one final time, his words quiet but carrying to every ear. This is not conquest. This is warning. Continue down this path, and silence will be all that remains of you. And in that silence, fear rooted itself so deep that none dared speak again. Terror had become the air they breathed. Every ruler in that hall felt it pressing down on them, a suffocating weight that none could shake. Their king, who had been the embodiment of their arrogance, now lay slumped and broken. Their fleets, which they had believed untouchable, burned in distant skies. Their weapons, once symbols of absolute authority, sat powerless in their hands. All of it had been stripped from them without warning, without battle cries, without the chance to fight back. The human diplomat stood unflinching at the center, and it was this calmness that crushed them more than any spectacle of violence could. There was no rush in his tone, no desperation in his manner. He behaved as though this outcome had always been the only outcome. That truth was harder to face than the death of their leader. It meant they had not lost a war, they had never even been contenders in it. The first to break was not the weakest, but one of the loudest generals, a creature who had roared for extermination only hours before. His voice, now trembling, begged for terms. We see your strength. State your conditions, human. Spare what remains of our people. His plea sent ripples through the chamber. Others who had scoffed at humanity only yesterday found their own courage faltering. Yet not all were ready to yield. Another commander, desperate to salvage pride, shouted that the human was bluffing, that his empire had reserves hidden far beyond reach. He slammed his palm against the activation rune of his console, demanding contact with his fleets. The projection above flickered and revealed his own hidden armada, ships buried deep in outer sectors, meant as insurance. But before relief could rise in his chest, the vessels on the screen erupted one after another, fire blooming silently across the void. His reserves, too, had been dismantled. His howl of denial collapsed into a broken whisper as he slumped into silence. The diplomat's voice cut through their despair, steady and precise. Every stronghold you trusted is compromised. Every code you considered unbreakable is in our hands. The heart of your empire beats because we allow it. Do not mistake this for chance. It is design. His words were not a threat but a cold recitation of fact. That distinction made them far more terrifying. Another ruler attempted to rise, her face contorted with rage. We cannot surrender to primitives. If we kneel, our species are finished. She reached for a hidden weapon beneath her robes, a ceremonial dagger laced with toxin. Before she could lift it, the image behind her shifted, showing her homeworld, its defense grid already disabled. Towers once glowing with energy stood dark. She froze, and the defiance drained from her eyes. She returned to her seat, hands trembling. The gathering unraveled. Voices once full of authority now cracked with panic. Some shouted for negotiation, others demanded silence, while a few sat paralyzed, staring at the human as though looking at an executioner. The sense of unity that had bound them in arrogance fractured into desperation. The diplomat allowed their chaos to echo for a moment before speaking again. We do not seek to enslave you. We do not desire your thrones. Humanity asks only this: never again raise your hand against us. If you value survival, remember this day. The next time you call for war, you will not live to regret it. His words were calm, but beneath them lay the unmistakable promise of finality. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not stunned disbelief. It was recognition. They understood now that they stood on the edge of eradication, and the only thing holding them back from it was the restraint of the envoy before them. Humanity had not conquered them with armies. Humanity had dismantled them with foresight, with patience, with precision. It was intellect that had broken their empire, not brute strength. The bravado that once filled the chamber was gone, replaced by the quiet despair of rulers forced to accept their vulnerability. For the first time, these species who believed themselves eternal came face to face with their mortality. The human had offered them survival, but it was clear the choice was theirs only because he allowed it. When the diplomat's gaze passed over them, each ruler lowered their eyes. Not one dared to meet his stare. They understood the unspoken truth: this was no negotiation. This was judgment. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy would remember. One by one, the defiant voices fell silent. What began as a chamber of roaring arrogance had become a hall of bowed heads and trembling hands. Pride was gone, replaced by the crushing realization that their survival depended on the mercy of the very species they had mocked. The diplomat stood at the center of it all, still as stone, the calm weight of inevitability radiating from him. The rulers, bound by instinct and fear, waited for terms. But the human was deliberate, letting silence carve its lesson deeper into their minds before he finally spoke. His words came low, unshaken, carrying no joy in conquest, only the certainty of authority. You demanded war. You have seen what it brings. Understand this clearly: humanity does not kneel, and it does not forgive threats. You will carry this day in your memory, and you will teach it to your descendants. The first lesson is survival. The second is never to mistake our patience for weakness. No one argued. The very idea of challenging his words seemed suicidal. Some rulers pressed their foreheads to the floor, others muttered oaths of surrender in their native tongues. A few sat motionless, hollow-eyed, the collapse of centuries of certainty weighing on them like chains. Their empire had been unbreakable in their minds, and yet it had fractured without a single fleet from humanity needing to stand in their skies. The envoy continued, his tone sharper now, every phrase like a blade cutting through whatever resistance lingered. You believed yourselves to be masters of the stars. But mastery is not measured by conquest. It is measured by restraint, by the ability to destroy and the choice not to. That is the power humanity holds. We came to you with peace. You spat on it. And now you live only because we allow it. The image shifted once more across the hall, displaying the galaxy's nodes of power, each highlighted in red. Every stronghold, every command post, every capital system pulsed on the projection as if marked for execution. None doubted that if the diplomat willed it, every light would dim before their eyes. That knowledge was not simply terrifying, it was permanent. The thought of opposing humans again became unthinkable. A counselor broke the silence, his voice cracking. Then we submit. Not as slaves, not as subjects, but as survivors who understand the cost of arrogance. Let this day be remembered, so no species repeats this mistake. His words carried the weight of consensus. Others murmured their agreement, and those too proud to speak aloud let their bowed heads serve as acknowledgement. The diplomat did not nod, nor smile, nor show relief. He simply answered with finality. So it will be. Humanity does not seek your thrones or your chains. But if ever again you raise your banners against us, you will not find another envoy. You will find silence. And silence will be the last thing you know. The hall quivered with those words. Silence was no longer emptiness to them. It had become a symbol of death, of inevitability, of the human way of war, quiet, unseen, absolute. They had demanded battle and discovered that the true battlefield had already been lost before the first strike. The body of their king sat as testimony, his reign ending not with rebellion or war, but with a single, precise act. That corpse was no longer just the end of a tyrant. It was a warning carved into the history of every species present. The tale would be whispered in courts and academies, carried across generations. When the humans come with peace, take it. When they offer mercy, accept it. For to deny them is to invite extinction without ever hearing the sound of the blade. As the diplomat turned to leave, no one dared to stop him. No one even breathed too loudly. It was not a retreat, it was a demonstration of control. He had arrived alone, unarmed, dismissed as fragile. He departed as the embodiment of fear, carrying with him the obedience of those who once believed themselves unconquerable. And when the doors closed behind him, the chamber remained drenched in silence, not the silence of peace, but the silence of a verdict delivered. They knew the lesson would echo far beyond that hall, across the stars, across time itself. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy would never forget.